Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm your host, John Gonzalez, alongside our NBA insider, Bill Ryder, and in our Florida HQ studios, Ashley Nicole Moss. And anything interesting happened to you guys last night?
No.
Anything new?
Just chilling, John.
Nothing. We're going to get into it. I'm very excited for the show. All right, later in the show, the Bucks climb back into the series without Dame and Giannis, and we'll look ahead to tonight's games. But first, the best series in the playoffs by far. Another banger of a game last night between the Knicks and the Sixers. Sixers take Game 5, 112-106 in an overtime thriller. Knicks still up 3-2, but the Sixers are the first team in NBA history to win a playoff game down 6 with 30 seconds to go in regulation. Had never happened before. I thought it was over. I emailed you guys on our chain and said that I thought it was over. And then I guess, Bill, that it was the all-time reverse jinx because mere seconds later, here you go. You can see the timestamps on this. 2 minutes later, we're going into overtime because Tyrese Maxey hit 7 points in the final 25 seconds to send it to overtime, and then they won it in overtime. Gang, we got a series.
First of all, let me just say, you're a fake fan because you were already going ahead and packing it up and, waving the white flag, and we have the evidence and we have the paper trail, if you will. That could never be me. I'm fighting to the death, and I'm going all the way. If I'm going down, I'm going down with this ship swinging. You're already waving the white flag and saying, listen, let's go ahead and see how we can discuss the Knicks winning this series. You should be ashamed of yourself, John. Let's focus on that first. You should be ashamed of yourself. Shame.
In 141 games prior to that, it had never happened. It took 142 for the Sixers to pull it off. So that's okay. I'll take the shame on that one. Bill, from the outside here, Tyrese Maxey played 52 minutes. I mean, he went 17 for 30, 46 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists. The Tyrese Maxey game, they needed every bit of that.
It's insane. I knew that the series would come down to which player, which team's superstar would take over late in the game. I just didn't realize that the Sixers superstar was young Mr. Maxey rather than Joel Embiid, because he saved that dude's bacon. We'll see what happens in this series. I still think the Sixers can win it. Obviously, the Knicks can win it. But that 4-point, Ash, I'm just saying, this has been a close, as a neutral perspective, as somebody who's already lost a bunch of money to somebody else on this show, betting on sports, and I'm not doing it again, it can go either way. You're right. Tip of the cap to Maxey. I didn't think he could top the 4-point play for just sheer guts and excellence under pressure. And then Hart misses one of those 2 free throws. And obviously, we talked about it. Maxey comes down and drills a long 3. That dude's a baller. Brunson's a baller. I know Embiid had a great statistical game, turned the ball over a lot. But, Ash, I'm just saying, maybe you guys are going to win, but you have to fear Tyrese Maxey as much or more perhaps than Joel Embiid.
There's no maybe we're going to win. Listen, the Knicks, I've been saying since the beginning, Knicks in 6. So we're right on schedule. This is what I've been predicting. Look, I didn't predict the absolute just domino effect of disaster that transpired down the stretch and in overtime by the Knicks, right? It started with Josh Hart missing 2 very crucial free throws, which ultimately would have put the game away. It would have been a 2-possession game, and Tyrese Maxey's logo 3-pointer would have never sent it into overtime. It would have been that. So Josh Hart got in his own way by missing free throws, and the word is free throws. Emphasis on the word free. Make them. Take them. They're free points. So that's that. Second of all, down the stretch, there was a lot of miscommunication from the Knicks, right? Both teams were turning the ball over a lot in this game. I do think the 76ers did a little bit of a better job down the stretch, kind of capitalizing off of those turnovers and making them into points and second chance opportunities. They were doing a better job on the boards, especially late in the fourth quarter. Also, their defensive scheme switched up late in the fourth quarter, which was making it hard for Brunson to kind of do what Brunson wants to do. But again, I give credit where credit is due to Tyrese Maxey. He played an absolutely phenomenal game, 46 points from him. I'm a big fan of him. I like his mentality. You can't teach that kind of mentality. He's a dog, and I'm going to give him his flowers. But I'm not as nervous as I think a lot of Knicks fans are this morning, because the Knicks shot themselves in the foot. It wasn't like Philly outplayed them. They were keeping themselves in the game throughout the whole game. I'll give them that. They never quit. But the Knicks got in their own way with turnovers, got in their own way with missing free throws, got in their own way with lack of communication late in the fourth quarter and ultimately in overtime. And that's not something that we have seen from this team throughout this series and throughout this season. I still think Knicks in 6. I still think that they're the deeper team, and I'm not worried. I'm just upset that we couldn't go ahead and celebrate on our own court, and now we have to do it in our second home court, which is going to be not as fun, you know?
It's interesting that you mentioned all the things that happened for the Knicks for it to fall apart, because it was the exact same thing, but in reverse in game 2. I mean, the Sixers did the exact same thing where they got in their way and things didn't work out for them. And then it was this classic game where the Knicks ended up winning a game down by 5 with 25 seconds left, which had only happened, a handful of times in the last 25 years. So for both of these teams to experience that on both sides is really, really amazing. The series has been absolute bonkers, but it's been ridiculous.
Like
but I want to mention too.
Yeah,
game 2 ball don't lie. But when you're talking about the Knicks getting in their own way, I thought they made 2 critical errors at the end of regulation. Number one, you're up 3. We talk about this on this show a lot. Producer Aaron's a big fan of it. I'm a big proponent of fouling when you're up 3. Eat up some of that clock, put them at the line, then they're going to foul you. You're going to eat up even more clock. Instead, they let Maxey get ahead of steam, and he takes one from the logo and he drains it. But beyond that, I thought it was very curious that they decided to have their best defender, OG Anunoby, off in the corner, standing there face guarding Tobias Harris. Like, what are you doing? I thought that was a gift from Tibbs, and I thank him for it.
No, it was definitely poor defensive and offensive schemes from the Knicks in the last few minutes of regulation. And it's interesting too, because like I said, the 76ers did a really good job at pre-switching as often as they could, because it kept a more mobile defender on Brunson, which made it harder for him to, again, cook like he wanted to cook and really needed to cook because of those crucial missed free throws from Hart, and also crucial missed free throws from Jalen Brunson as well. He kind of bricked up a couple as well, which again could have been the difference maker in the game. And like I said, I will give credit to the 76ers. They were doing a good job on the boards, getting those second and third chance opportunities, which ultimately bridged the gap even more. I don't think you'll see the same mistakes from the Knicks in Game 6. It is very hard to close out a game. It shouldn't be hard to close out a game at home, though. Ultimately, you should be able to go ahead, and when the chips fall, you should be on the winning end of that equation, because your role players tend to play better at home. You have the energy of the crowd, the familiarity of your home court. But again, going back to Philly is not a death sentence for the Knicks, because as we saw in the game prior in Philly, the home court advantage is not 100% there, and the Knicks are able to go ahead and win in Philly. This has been an interesting series for definitely, but I do think that the Knicks will go ahead and pull this out and close it out in 6.
Ash, I think you make a great point. It is so hard to close out these series, and it was for Tibbs too, right? I mean, as John talked about, his decision-making at the end and what they did with Anunoby, you got to foul Maxey before he crosses the half-court line. But I'll say this about where the series is and what could happen, because momentum is so powerful. Yes, the Knicks took over the Sixers arena last time. This is a weekday game. It's not a Sunday game. It's not as easy for people to get off work, jump on the train, go to Philly. If you want to come back, you're coming back in the middle of the night or get in a hotel. It doesn't mean people won't be there. But I was in New York when that happened, and there were just people who were walking around getting ready to go to the Sixers game, because it's such an easy commute. It's an if. But this game has come down to, almost every game has come down to a shot here or there, a poor call here or there, poor decision-making by Nick Nurse not getting the timeout in Game 2, and then Tibbs not really understanding how to navigate that final play where Maxey hit that ridiculous 3, which means it's close, which means it really can go either way. And if the Sixers win Game 6, to me, the weight of Knicks' futility for a generation, the pressure of letting the 3-1 series lead go away, the small margins, I think it flips very quickly to Philadelphia's small advantage. So obviously they're all huge, but if Philly can just win at home, I love the Sixers' chances going forward.
Real quick before we go to break, John, listen, Penn Station would have to flood for Knicks fans to not make their way to Wells Fargo Arena. And even then, if it flooded, they would just swim to Philly. Trust me when I say there will be no shortage of Knicks fans, because it is a weekday. People are probably already putting in their notice that they're taking off of work on Thursday.
Yeah, I have a theory about that, why Sixers fans didn't show up for the last game. We can get into that on the other side. But I will say real quickly to Bill's point about how close this series has been. We've played 5 games so far in this series. The Sixers in that series have 2 points more than the Knicks. That's how close it's been. It's been
Crazy.
unbelievable the entire time. We also have to discuss Joel Embiid, who had a game that's your mileage may vary on the game that he had in game 5, but he certainly has, let's just say, drawn the interest of Knicks fans. We're going to talk about their obsession with Joel Embiid when the show continues right here on CBS Sports Network.
Hello. Welcome back to Beyond the Arc, everyone. John is stuck in the Matrix because he's
emotionally frozen.
He disrespected the New York Knicks, so I had to send in reinforcements to go ahead and hack the system and boot him out the Zoom. So why don't we go ahead and reboot that? Me and Bill are going to be holding down the fort. Bill, we were kind of previewing a little bit of Joel Embiid and his love affair for the New York Knicks, at least his love affair for New York City, I should say. So we have a clip. We're going to go ahead and play this, and then we're going to dissect it a little bit. Roll it.
Yeah, I love New York. New York is my favorite city in the world. I have a place here for the past 5 years, so I just love New York. And then the fans, when you play against a team, they're always going to pick that guy, and they seem to have picked me, which is fine. I love it. If I gotta be the punching bag, and you hear a lot of FMB, that's okay. I love it. I wish I was myself. So it usually gets me going in those situations because you wanna put yourself in those situations and kind of shut them up.
Welcome back.
All right, I'm back. I'm back. Live TV. Look at this. We did it.
Yeah.
You heard Embiid talking there about the New York fans booing him. His game was sort of all over the place last night. He went for 19, 16, 10. He also had a triple-double, but also almost a quadruple-double because he had 9 turnovers. But Knicks fans are outrageous in their disdain for Embiid. They have talked about him more this series than I think Philly fans and basketball fans writ large have talked about him. Ash, why can't you guys get Embiid out of your head?
Well, first of all, we're playing a series against him. Secondly, I think that more of the reason why he's been such a talking point, outside of the fact that we're direct opponents of him, I think a lot of his play has been controversial this series, to say the least, and it has kind of started a discourse about him as a player. Now, I don't know if it's just the intensity of this series, the Knicks and the 76ers and the rivalry of these fan bases. But I do think that there has been a different microscope on Joel Embiid, and maybe that microscope has opened up different conversations of how he plays and how much of that is just aggression and tenacity and dominance, and how much of that is the other D word, which is dirty. And I think that's probably been the biggest talking point of this series, and rightfully so. We've had the conversations on this pod. There have been some plays that I think we can all agree are just, the intensity of the playoffs. And then there have been some other plays where you're kind of raising some eyebrows and you're like, come on, Joel, was that necessary? But I think the thing also that just grinds our gears in New York is that he does it and then goes, what did I do? I didn't do it. Who did that? Wasn't me. It's like, if you're going to make a move, at least stand by it and just, at least that's what Draymond does. He's like, yeah, I did it. And what? You know what I mean? Joel's the opposite. So I don't know. It's a lot going on with Joel Embiid this season.
I agree with all that. I'm going to add another perspective and theory. I think there's some disdain, tainted yearning going on between New York City and Joel Embiid. Remember, Embiid was back in the day. He's been linked to the Knicks. And when I flew back from New York City last week when I was doing the pod and the TV show from my dungeon hotel room, I watched Anyone But You, right, with Sidney Sweeney and Glenn Powell. And like Embiid and like the Knicks, these are two very attractive, very damaged people who secretly want to be together, but because of misunderstanding and some competition at the beginning of the movie, pretend to love each other, or hate each other. We all know they're going to end up together. Just get over the tension. This is what this reminds me of. I think Embiid is over the Sixers. I think he looks at what the Knicks are doing. He wants to live in New York. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he has talked about and just did. I've had a place in New York, and I can't do your imitation so much better, Ash. I'm just going to defer the invitations to you.
I got you.
I do. I think
I've had a place in New York for 5 years. I love this city. It's amazing.
I mean, this is the third act of Anyone But You. I mean, he's Sydney Sweeney. New York City's Glenn Powell.
The Knicks are Sydney Sweeney. We're
I don't know.
We're the better.
Wacky
we got to be the more
wonderful.
attractive. No. We got to be the more attractive person in the couple.
Lots of talent, but maybe you should play a little nicer. Either way, that, John, to me is part of the subplot here. Is obviously the Knicks would love to have Embiid, and Embiid sure sounds like he loves what's happening in New York. I think this is a match made in the future. I think that's what's going on.
I think it's very funny that Knicks fans and New Yorkers in general always talk about how tough they are and have not stopped crying this entire series.
What?
Like tissue paper thin.
Oh,
all they do,
fired back.
The whole bit.
I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry.
Hold on.
Who filed a grievance in game 1 and 2? It wasn't us.
Soft,
right, and
Ash.
Since then, the discourse has been Embiid is too rough. He plays too hard. Why won't he keep his hands to himself? Meanwhile, last night in the first quarter, Mitchell Robinson picked up Kelly Oubre and WWE slammed him, and everybody went, all right, let's keep it pushing because it's the playoffs. But I do want to talk more about Knicks fans and how they did come down.
Hold on, time out for a second. Time out before we move on. Real quick, he didn't body slam him. Oubre, Kelly kind of, did a little bit of a flop. It wasn't purposeful. Mitchell Robinson tried to help him up because he didn't mean to go ahead and flip him that. It's no different than I watched Joel Embiid yank Mitchell Robinson by the ankles and bring him to the ground, which caused him to be in a walking boot and miss the next game. Let's not do this.
That didn't cause him
you
to
guys
be
have been too nice to each other.
But
this is great.
That's a completely different thing. This is what I'm talking about. Knicks fans just like, oh, Joel Embiid, he's so mean. But so the Knicks fans coming down, we talked about this in the previous segment, coming down to Philadelphia. I have a theory about this. I actually do think that Ashley is right, that Knicks fans will show up in numbers because, Bill, you were saying, if Philly can win Game 6, the Sixers are back in the series. I think Knicks fans expect to win Game 6, and I think Sixers fans expect to lose Game 6 because it would be the most Sixers thing on the planet for them to win Game 5 in New York, come back on their home floor, and lay an absolute egg. They've done it time and time again. And the reason why I have a theory about Sixers fans selling tickets and Knicks fans gobbling them up. I was in San Diego this past weekend with a bunch of Philadelphia transplants. Phillies were playing the Padres. And I was talking to a guy named Mike Levin, who is half of the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast. It's the big Sixers fan podcast. It's the biggest independent individual team podcast in the NBA out there. And I said, wouldn't you want to go to Game 7 if the Sixers make it? And he said no, because if they win, no matter where he is, he'll be happy. But if he goes and they lose, he won't get over it. That's the Sixers fan mentality. Why would I go to Game 6 and watch them potentially lose when I could sell my tickets, make triple the price, and be home just in case they lose?
And that is why the 76ers are perpetual losers, because their fan base is. How would you not?
When was the last time the Knicks won something?
But you know what you can't say about the Knicks and their fans? The Knicks fans will always show up. And if they lose, they take it on the chin. And if they win, they celebrate. They'll be mad. They'll scream, they'll yell, they'll complain, and they have been doing, and we have been doing for years, but they always show up in drones for their team. They travel well for their team, whether it's Charlotte, whether it's Miami. If they lose, they lose. They're not happy about it. But if they win, they're celebrating outside of whatever arena the win just transpired in. For you guys to not go to a Game 6 because of the potential to get your feelings hurt, when your feelings have been perpetually hurt for seasons and years. The process was a failure, and it has been a failure. You should be used to disappointment, but at least go on the just shred of optimism that maybe you win. I can't, you know what? Go ahead, Bill. I can't.
They are used to
it. I can't.
Real talk detective.
Bill, which would be the more disappointing?
You guys are rivals. You
guys
should have been. You've been so nice to each other. Sorry, what's that, John? I was just enjoying the.
What would be the more disappointing? One of these teams is going to have a really rough offseason. What would be the bigger disappointment for the Sixers to lose this after climbing back into the series, or for the Knicks to blow a 3-1 lead?
I think the Knicks. That's why I think the pressure in Game 7 is huge. You go up 3-1. You're the better team. Embiid, whatever my criticisms or concerns about his fourth quarter play, is playing through 51 different injuries. He's got partial facial paralysis. The officials are probably on him now in a way they weren't before, so I'm not sure he can be all the. Yeah, it's bad all around. But the Knicks have more to lose. I think a collapse is a totally different thing than a comeback, right? I mean, I think the Sixers have already covered themselves in a little bit of respectability winning that game. So if Philly goes out and plays a really close game and the Knicks win, I think you can hold your head high. I think if the Knicks lose the next two, Ash, I think that's disaster territory.
No, I agree completely because the Knicks are the more complete, healthier team. Obviously, Julius Randle is a huge loss, and it's felt at different parts of the game, different parts of the series, but they have so many more weapons, 3 through 9 than Philly has. You have Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and then it's kind of like, sometimes. So I don't think the expectation for this team going into this series was as high as it was for the Knicks to start with. So every game that they've been able to win is like, whoa, that was impressive. Whereas the Knicks, despite the individual performances of certain players, Jalen Brunson's had some big games, Josh Hart's had some games where it's uncharacteristic of the type of player that he is. So it's celebrated, OG, those guys. You expect the Knicks to win because they're more complete, they're better. And so if they were to collapse, it would just be more catastrophic than if the 76ers were to win because nobody really had much expectation for them coming into this series.
A lot of pressure, a lot of expectations on those Knicks. Everybody, I think we're all in agreement. The Knicks got to win this. I mean, Sixers, nobody's counting on them. We'll see what happens in Game 6 on Thursday. By the way, 9 o'clock tip-off Eastern for that? That's ridiculous. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about the off seasons for the teams that have already been eliminated and who has the most urgency going into it. That's next right here on CBS Sports Network. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. You can find us wherever you find your favorite podcast. Please download and subscribe. All right, so some teams already eliminated here. One of those are the New Orleans Pelicans. David Griffin, their general manager, he talked during their exit interviews yesterday, and he said that this offseason is going to be different for New Orleans.
In the past, we've always erred on the side of continuity, and our takeaway has always been, let's see this group healthy. I think we've seen it enough. I think we had some really, really good opportunity to see Zion play a career high in games. I think we saw it for segments of time well enough to understand that we've got a lot of work to do. I want to be really, really clear. This is not going to be a summer of complacency. It's time to get better.
That sounds to me like a man about to shake things up. Got us thinking between the 3 teams already eliminated, the Suns, the Lakers, and the Pelicans. Bill, you go first. Who do you think has the greatest urgency this offseason?
Until Griff, and I know Griff, and I like Griff, and I've known him for a while, but until he spoke, I would have said, I don't know, there's urgency in Phoenix, and there's no freedom unless you're going to move on from Booker or Durant. So my answer would have been the Lakers because they're sort of in the middle in terms of flexibility, and they have high expectations for however long LeBron is there. Fair or not fair, but I think it's a bizarre analysis by David Griffin. Griff is right. We saw a lot. And what we saw, I thought, was a really good basketball team when everybody was healthy and Zion was out there and Ingram was right. And we talked, Ash and John, a lot about this over the course of the regular season, almost top 10 in offensive and defensive rating. We thought, and I think correctly so, that they were a sneaker competitive team before they really trailed off at the end. If you go back to last season, they were in first place as late as January in the West before Zion inevitably got hurt. So for me, the question is, do you trust and do you have a choice in trusting Zion's health? And if the answer is you do trust him or you don't have a choice, you have to build around him. I think it's pretty close, Ash. I think it's pretty close, John. It's not like this is a marquee destination for free agents, and we can get into some of the things they have some flexibility too. Valanciunas' contract is expiring. You've got Ingram and Trey Murphy who are contract extension eligible, which I know creates some decisions you have to make, but I think it's an opportunity because you're not going to bring guys like that there in free agency. You have to be able to get them in through trade of the draft and then extend them. So to answer your question, John, I would have said the Lakers, but obviously David Griffin has a different idea, and I think it's a strange analysis on his part.
I don't believe the Pelicans. And listen, I understand that
You don't believe in them, or you don't believe them?
No, I believe in the Pelicans in terms of like the potential and the guys that are there, but I don't believe in the organization to go ahead and make them better to be a different team, a more competitive team come next season. So I understand that there's difference in the organization than there was, back when Anthony Davis was part of it. And even if you want to go back even further, when Chris Paul was part of it, obviously it's been a lot of changes since then. But to Bill's point, not many people want to play in New Orleans. I think Zion is 1 foot out the door, 1 foot in the door when it comes to playing in New Orleans. If you go back to when he got drafted, his face wasn't like thrilled when New Orleans took him. He thought he was going to be a Knick. And you hear all of the back and forth between the reports of whether it's coming from Zion directly or, Zion's family. He's not very much involved with the New Orleans organization outside of what he does on the court. It's not like he's very involved, they say, with, everything that New Orleans does in the community. It's his family doesn't really want to be there. He's not the happiest there. And again, he's had a really great season up until that unfortunate injury, but you have to go ahead and, think about injury when you think about Zion's future in New Orleans. And also you have to incorporate the fact that, does he really want to be there long term? I don't believe, despite the success that the Pelicans have had this season, and they looked good, they looked like there was a lot of promise, I don't think that has changed his mind and his ultimate plan to play somewhere else. And I wonder if you have to make a decision between Zion and Brandon Ingram, because CJ McCollum's aging out. You have to make a decision between the two. Do you want to go with someone who's chronically injured and maybe 1 foot in, 1 foot out? Or do you go ahead and put money on someone who did not have a great playoff showing, but again, he was coming off of an injury, but has expressed interest wholeheartedly that he wants to be there? I don't think you can move forward with both, and I don't know if New Orleans believes that they can, and if they do believe that, that's problematic for me.
They're at a crossroads right now. I think for sure they're going to decide between BI and Zion, and I think it's fine because, to Bill's point, like, I look at this team and I go, they had a really good season. They've got a lot of good players, and they've got a ton of draft picks. They're kind of like in a mini OKC situation because they controlled the Los Angeles Lakers draft picks in perpetuity until the end of time. I think there's a lot of different levers that they can pull. I like where New Orleans is, and David Griffin is a really good general manager. He's a smart dude. I have faith in him to fix it. The Suns, as Bill mentioned, don't have a lot of levers to pull, so I don't think that they can do much. That leaves me to the obvious one. I think it's the Lakers that are against a rock and a hard place this offseason. I know you guys talked about it on yesterday's show, but Darvin Ham seems like he's not long for this world. They immediately sent up a flare saying, hey, we'd be willing to draft Bronny, which is, that just reeks of desperation. Yeah, and then LeBron James, we should mention his tweet. Last night, he goes and tweets out that he doesn't, he's seen all these reports. He knows that people are speculating about his future, but that he hasn't made, here's the tweets on camera right now. I've seen and heard a lot of reports about my future. I said it last night, and I'll say it again. I don't know yet, as I'm only thinking about spending time with my family and my friends. When I know after speaking with the fam, my counsel, as well as my representation about it, then you guys will know. Until then, love. He's got a 51.4 player option, $51.4 million player option that he could pick up, or that it could extend him 3 years at $164 million. He's going to be 40 in December. It's not just a one-way street here. It's not just for me. If LeBron James wants to suck up all that money, the Lakers really got to think about how much they're willing to invest in a guy who, despite the fact that he's been amazing this past season at 39, he's going to be 40. Time comes for us all eventually.
You also have D'Angelo Russell, right?
There's no world where they're not. There's no world. Sorry, there's no world where they're not paying him whatever he wants to stay. Yeah. He is. John, you're right, but the Lakers gave, and I know this makes people angry, but it is true. The Lakers gave Kobe Bryant a deal he should not have gotten his last 2 years, so Kobe could finish as a Laker, and the Lakers weren't very good over that stretch, and that is the culture of the Buss family. Jeannie Buss obviously runs things now. I don't think LeBron would tie himself up for 3 years, but I think if he would, the Lakers would put that pen and paper right in front of him because they're all about player empowerment. And he is, as I understand it, he loves the Lakers love him. Whatever drama is going on is not a LeBron James issue. And that might be for Darvin Ham. I don't know that he's done Darvin Ham any favors, but in that building, they love LeBron, and LeBron loves being a Laker. So I think what LeBron has to decide, if you want to take him at face value, Ash, which you and I didn't entirely yesterday. I think LeBron likes the attention. But what does he want? Does he want money and to be a Laker? So you've got some options in LA. Does he want to go play for a competitor and make, pretty good money and try to have a little more of a chance? I'm not even sure where you go. Do you go to Orlando? Do you go to Philadelphia? Does he say, to hell with money? I've got enough. Nike pays me a ton. I just want to go be on the best team possible. I doubt that, but the Warriors are the betting favorite to land him if he leaves LA. So I think if you want to take him at face value, Ash, for me, when he says I got to figure out what I'm going to do, it also is figuring out what does he actually want going forward. What does he want in his career the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Obviously, if he wants to play with Bronny, which he's made very clear that he does, the Lakers and staying with the Lakers gives him the most leverage to make that happen. But on the other side of that coin, when you talk about adding Bronny to that roster, you lose a roster spot. D'Angelo Russell has an opt-in. He's probably going to ask for more money from the Lakers. Will he get it? Don't know. But it also limits the amount of moves you can make, because even if you go after a Trae Young and a Donovan Mitchell, does that take your team over the edge in the Western Conference to go ahead and win a chip, which ultimately I think that LeBron wants another one and he thinks that he's capable of winning another one. I don't believe that he can do that on the Lakers. And I think that his best chance to go ahead and win another one is to take his talents elsewhere. Now, when you do that, you can't go ahead and throw your weight around with the Bronny situation, if those reports are true, to a different team, because that team is drafting or trading for or getting rather LeBron James. They're not getting LeBron James and Bronny, and it's going to be very hard to convince a championship contender elsewhere to take on LeBron and his son, and I don't think he has that issue in LA, so it's weighing the pros and cons, and that's going to be the biggest question mark.
Bill, I see you like kind of not sure about getting another contender to take on Bronny and LeBron.
Yeah, I think they take. I mean, Giannis's brother gets to play in the league, and let's.
Yes, he does.
I think
but Giannis wanted, but it's different though. Like it's a little bit different.
And Jalen Brunson's dad gets to coach in the league, and Jalen's great, but
Rick was already there before Jalen, though.
I'm just saying that those.
I was going to say quickly before we go.
I think it's worth noting just a report that came out today, just to this conversation that we should just mention. That I'm not sure I buy it, but there's a report that the James family is open to Bronny going somewhere else and developing away from LeBron before they play together. Just
somewhere else should be college, by the way. But real quick before we go, the other team that we didn't mention here for facing a difficult offseason is the Suns, who we've talked about at length on this podcast. They can't move Bradley Beal because he has a no trade clause. They have no picks. Booker is the face of the franchise. KD's going to be 36 years old. Oh, by the way, they just got swept by the Wolves, and we haven't been on CBS Sports Network since that happened. So, Bill, the bet, unfortunately, did not go well for you. You're going to owe us dinner on you up to $1,000.
Yeah, so my brother runs a great restaurant in Denver. So we'll go when we're all there for the finals, presuming I hope we are. I'll take it to Bobby Ryder's restaurant. I'll rack up the $1,000. I'll pay for it myself. I was going to try to expense some of it. I was going to ask the boss but I was told that's a dirty move.
But going to your brother's restaurant, do you get a discount on the items? Because then that's cheating.
I think he upcharges me. He definitely charges me. Yeah, he charges me.
I think you keep it in the family. There's no problem with that. But we'll all dine, we'll break bread, and it'll be fun. Quick break, and then when we come back, we got to talk about more basketball from last night. All of a sudden, the Milwaukee Bucks have life. That's going to be next on CBS Sports Network. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. John, Ashley, and Bill here. Be sure to check out our YouTube page at Beyond the Arc CBS. Subscribe to it. Hit the like button, all that good stuff. All right, Bucks and Pacers. I was on the Pacers. You guys were on the Pacers. We thought that this was over. Turns out not over. Bucks end up winning 115-92 last night. Closed the series gap. Now it's 3-2. They didn't have Giannis for Game 4. For Game 5. They didn't have Dame for Game 5. It's the first time in NBA playoff history that a team won a game without its top two scorers, which kind of surprised me. I'm kind of blown away here, Bill. Do you give the Bucks a shot, especially because after the game, Doc said there's a chance that they might get one or both of these guys back for Game 6?
I give them a shot to overreact and potentially screw up either Giannis or Dame longer term. Look, it's a commendable win. And they shot lights out, and we talked about this earlier with the Knicks. It's just true in general. Ash made the point. It's a real one. It is hard to close out series. So, okay, you won a game. You shot great. Good job. John, Ashley, my worry is I don't want Doc Rivers under pressure or John Horst, the GM, under pressure, or Giannis and Dame under the pressure to compete because they love the game and they want to be out there, rushing either of those two stars back and seeing a situation which we discussed nonstop, like we saw with KD a few years ago when he was with the Warriors, where he came back from a calf injury and blew out his Achilles, and everything was problematic after that. And that is my worry, because the hair on my arm raised a little bit throughout the series as Doc has been planting these little signs this could happen. I'm not shutting Dame down, and I think Giannis can come back eventually. And you're right, John. Now after the game, they're very, 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 very close. Why don't you be very, 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 very cautious, Doc, and just put the brakes on that? Because I don't think it's going to work over the course of the next two rounds. And I don't think it is worth and I'm not, look, maybe the medical staff knows what they're doing. I just worry that Doc and the Bucks and the two players themselves could screw up things longer term for a goal that is not real. They are not winning an NBA championship this year. They're not.
No, I agree with you completely. I mean, shout out to Chris Middleton, former New York Knick, Bobby Portis.
He's been awesome.
Who was, when we had the conversation about the NBA awards, he was actually my pick for Sixth Man of the Year. Bobby Portis has been phenomenal for the Milwaukee Bucks, especially with all of the injuries, whether it's Dame, whether it's Giannis, whether it's both of them together, whether it's Chris Middleton. He's been an anchor for this team this entire season. So shout out to him. But I agree with Bill completely. Like, what is the realistic expectation for this team? And it kind of goes back to where I was Joel Embiid when we were having the conversation with the 76ers. Although it's not as severe because Joel Embiid did have more time to kind of rest, and rehab his injury before the playoffs. For Giannis and Dame, it kind of happened at the worst possible time for them, right? But my rationale is the same. What is the expectation, or what is the realistic expectation for this team? And is it worth jeopardizing a healthy insert player name here for something that probably won't happen? And I think when you're talking about Dame and Giannis, they're such an important part of the success of this Milwaukee Bucks team for the long term, forever how long they play together, that by jeopardizing that for probably a second round exit, depending on what that matchup looks like, is just kind of counterproductive and would be borderline idiotic. And it would just be risking longevity and risking long-term goals for immediate satisfaction, and a lot of the times that's a recipe for disaster. So even if they could play, even if they're 75%, I don't bring them back. It's just not worth it.
I got to talk about the decision making there, but we should mention, you mentioned Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis. Chris Middleton has been amazing in this series without his two best running mates here, but the decision making on not bringing them back, that goes to the medical staff. But for some reason, I don't know if you guys have noticed this in the past, but for some reason, when Doc Rivers doesn't have his best guys, that's when Doc Rivers ends up being an actually okay coach and having some success. Like going back to like the Lob City Clippers after they detonated that thing, and he was looking at a team with like SGA before they traded him, Lou Williams, who was a perennial sixth man of the year, and Tobias Harris before he got that massive contract in Philadelphia. That was some of the best coaching that he's done. And in this series without Giannis and Dame, and Bill, I know you hate Doc, but like Doc has done an okay job.
No, he's got to dig deep in his bag, John. That's why. He's got to dig deep in the bag.
I just think he's overrated. But I think another interesting question has popped up, to your point, and in this series that hasn't been discussed a lot, because there's been a lot of conversation about, do Giannis and Lillard fit? How about, do Lillard and Chris Middleton fit? And is there a world where, because Middleton has been underwhelming at times, and often when he's been on the floor with Damian Lillard. So we always talk about this Giannis Lillard fit, but it's really all three guys. If that team's going to be good enough, whenever all of them are healthy to make deep runs, all three of them have to be great. And maybe Middleton's just getting right, or maybe for whatever reason, what he does on the floor gets taken away from when he's out there with Lillard. Because with Lillard not there, Middleton's looked like the guy that I remember being the all-star who helped, and Drew Holiday was there too, but helped Giannis win an NBA championship.
Yeah, he's looked really good in this series. He's had to do a lot more too, but we'll see what happens as they go into Game 6 coming up. All right, quick break again for us, and then we're going to preview tonight's matchups between the Heat and the Celtics and the Mavericks and the Clippers right here on Beyond the Arc on CBS Sports Network. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. 2 games in the association tonight. We got the Heat and the Celtics. Celtics up 3-1 in that series. No Kristaps. He's got a calf injury. He's going to be out for several games as expected. Celtics still favored by 14 in that one. And then the one that I think that And then I think we're all pretty excited about this one. Mavericks and Clippers, series tied 2-2. No Kawhi Leonard. Mavs 2.5-point favorites, Bill.
Yeah, and the Clippers are, by the way, undefeated, and they've won every game that Kawhi has set out, and they've lost every game that Kawhi has played. Weird. It's kind of it is weird. So I think, and we've talked about, I think the Mavs are the better team. I think it'll be close. I don't think there are multiple James Harden games in a good way they're going to lift LA. I hope he'll prove me wrong. I hope people succeed. I don't hate him, John. I don't hate the guy. I don't trust the guy. I like the Mavs, but ask John, this series is close to me. And as much as I'm excited to watch it, whichever team advances, it really now feels like it's earning a right just to get slaughtered by the Thunder in the next round.
It's interesting, right? Because after you go from Kyrie and Luka, who's dealing with a knee sprain, which has kind of limited some of his abilities to do some of the things that Luka does really, really well, the rest of the Mavericks team has not really held much of their weight. When you look at the Clippers team, James Harden and Paul George have been holding down the fort and doing so very well, much to the dismay of James Harden haters like Bill and myself.
Ashley's guy.
But it's interesting, right? Because I wonder if the role players that the Mavs need to play well because of the situation with Luka, who's been very up and down, if they're going to be able to travel and play well on the road. You know the role players for the Clippers will play well. They usually do at home. But I wonder how the Mavs are going to respond to that. And I don't know if this particular game is going to swing in the direction of the Mavericks just because of that very reason.
This is such a massive series. And this game is such a massive game. It's going to go a long way to determining who can get out of the series. But one of these teams is going to have an offseason where you're like, oh no, what are we going to do here? If it's the Mavs, you have yet another year of Luka and Kyrie, and you can't get out of the first round. And what can you put around him? And do we need to separate the two of them? And what would that even look like? And should Jason Kidd come back? Or on the flip side, PG still has not signed that extension. James Harden's going to be a free agent. I've said before, I'd love to see PG end up in a Sixers uniform. I think he'd fit perfectly and be a huge upgrade over Tobias. But one of these two teams is going to have a really brutal summer.
Yeah, no, and look, by the way, Orlando is sort of interesting, depending how their playoffs go as a suitor for PG, I think, too. They've got the money, and let's say they win this series against Cleveland and are able to be sort of interesting in the next round. You're right, there's a lot riding for the Clippers' future on this game tonight.
That report came out a little bit earlier today where Orlando could be in the mix along with the 76ers for Paul George if the Clippers don't go ahead and re-sign them, which a lot of the reports are kind of pointing in the direction that they might not. So it's definitely
no state income tax in Florida. I actually like D'Angelo Russell for the Magic. I think he'd be a perfect fit for them, but we'll see what happens there. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We're going to be back at it tomorrow in podcast form. Be sure to check that out. But for now, for our NBA insider, Bill Ryder, for Ashley Nicole Moss, who along with all the other Knicks fans will be invading Philadelphia, I'm sure, on Thursday. I'm your host, John Gonzalez. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. See you tomorrow.